Hi, my name is Jesse, and welcome to the Sinners podcast. And today we have Tim, the worship pastor at City Church. Really excited to be doing this episode. Today we're going to be talking about worshiping God and how we should worship, how God has actually called us to worship. But before we get started, how's your week been?
Yeah, good mate, good. I've lost my voice, so I sound a little bit croaky.
Too much worshipping.
Yeah, that's it, mate. A lot of singing.
Yeah, very nice. Well, getting started into worship, obviously being a worship pastor at City Church, you probably have a history with singing and praising in church. But where does worship come into your testimony, into getting to know Jesus?
Yeah, absolutely, bro. Well, it's kind of how I came to know God, really, was in church at a youth night, and the music spoke to me and the worship spoke to me. It wasn't necessarily what the preacher was saying. The music is what got me towards God, and I didn't really know why that was a thing. And we sung this song, and it still resonates in my heart today, on Eagle's Wings. And it was just through that song I felt God, and that's how I kind of view worship too. Is that like when we worship, it is really the only thing we can bring to God.
Yeah, for sure.
So like, we can read, we can take in, we can hear about God, we can hear about all this stuff, but worship is the only thing where we feel like expressing our feelings.
Yeah, definitely.
Expressing how, and prayer, but expressing how we feel towards God. And so that's where it kind of all started for me, was back when I was about 16. If I go back even earlier, when I was a younger kid, like maybe 6 or 7, we went to a Baptist church, and Mum and Dad took me there, and we did Shout to the Lord, that song, Darlene's song.
Of course.
And I think I felt something in God's presence, being in God's presence through worship in that moment.
Yeah. As
a 6 or 7-year-old, not knowing what it was, not really knowing it was God until like later. But in my teenage years, I always remember it was the worship that would turn my heart towards God.
Yeah, I think that's something I've always noticed, is that music is definitely more powerful than we realize.
Yeah.
I mean, looking at mainstream in society, music is such an important part of culture, but I think there's something really powerful about music. Like, it brings communities together, brings cultures together. And I think when we look in religious perspectives on music, it's mentioned all throughout the Bible. We know that David was a musician himself, and he speaks all about it in the Psalms. But I think there's definitely something spiritually significant with music, especially music that is worshipping Jesus. Especially, I've known from when I was quite young, before I even really discovered what worship was about, I could feel a sense of something was going on when, you know, people have their hands raised and singing or just having a good time and dancing at the front and stuff. There was something more significant than just lyrics we're singing. And I feel like Christians and non-Christians alike know there's something really important with music, because you know, I have this thing for me when I listen to music, I get like goosebumps and stuff. Or so many people are different. I think there's like a disease where people can see colors when they hear music, but music actually has significance. But when we move that into spirituality with music, there's something worship, and that's amazing, because really it's giving thanks to God through music, which is a gift. It's a gift that He's given us. Obviously, you being a singer and a guitar player, with many gifts from God, how has that helped you being able to show your worship to God with those gifts?
I think because like I was always loving music as a kid. I'd play musical instruments like drums and trumpet, and so I loved music. I felt like when I started to know God, it was the way I felt like I could express to God was through music. Music's powerful, like you just said, because God created it. So either music can be used for bad or for good, but God created music. So it's not all saying that even just non-Christian songs are all bad. Some of it's really nice and beautiful, because God has created music, just like He's created trees, He's created the sea. He created music
for sure.
And so when we worship, when people say to me, "Well, why is it this style? It should just be this style." But I'm like, no, God's created so many different styles of music. Why can't worship be the old classical song that was written 300 years ago, saying "Holy, holy, holy," and then songs that are written today that have got a bit more of a modern feel? They're all worship. It's all worship to God.
Of course.
And so it's really important. And in my life, music was important. I feel like God has gifted, He gives gifts, and I think there was a gift of music in my life that just I then wanted to give to God. I wanted to give this gift that God had given me and give it to God, and I express my worship through music. For sure.
Yeah, no, I get that. Being a drummer myself as well, I think it's really amazing getting the gift to actually worship God in that way, whether it's drumming or singing or playing guitar or so many things. And I think, as you're saying, I think that there shouldn't be a genre, Christian music. I think Christian music can be any genre. If you're worshiping God, that's music for Jesus. I feel like that any music that is just giving praise to God, whether it's a hip-hop R&B song or it's the most classical, hymn you've ever heard, it's all worshipping the same God. We're all worshipping the one same God in Jesus Christ. But we see nowadays it causes a lot of conflict in the world and in society, whether it's the worship music itself or even the way we worship as well. What do you think about with the church? Because I know nowadays a big concept is the way the look of the church and when we're in worship. One thing I've seen a lot all around is like the lights and everything. And what is your opinion on people that might not always enjoy the crazy lights or the more upbeat music that we see nowadays?
Yeah, it's a really good question because I've been to churches that have no lights and have got natural light coming through everywhere, and the worship's just as powerful. So for me, it's just a style, style thing. So we worship with lights or moving lights or the LED walls or the LED strips, whatever you want to call it. But I know it's not everyone's cup of tea. And to be honest, sometimes I'm even like, I enjoy worship when I'm out in the bush and just looking at the birds and the trees and God's creation and have a bit of worship music going, worship there. So for me, it's not about that's the only way you can worship God. It's just a style, I think, of worship. And it's how our church, our style of worship is more of that kind of rocky type feel and that genre. But it doesn't mean it's the only way. And I sometimes enjoy different styles from our style because it is different.
Of course,
and it's, so like sometimes on Spotify I'll pick up some old hymns that are just like a choir or something and just listen to that once. It doesn't sound really like cool. But it's how I love how it's different.
Yeah, of course.
But in our style, I do love our style of worship where it's upbeat. It causes people to want to clap. It causes people to want to praise God. Because in the Bible, worship is expressed through Greek words and Hebrew words in so many different ways. Where it's like you can be, one word for worship could mean laying flat on the floor. One word for worship could be like yell out to God. And so worship is just an expression of so many different things that we can bring to God. And God works in all those, in all different ways.
Yeah, of course.
So I never discount the person that goes, I don't like the lights, I don't like the showiness, I like a certain way. Oh, that's cool. That's the way you like it. But this is how our church chooses to worship corporately.
Yeah, of course.
And so, that's kind of how I look at that. So it's not all bad. I think creating an atmosphere is important for worship. But you can create an atmosphere without lights.
Of course.
You can create an atmosphere without a sound system. Absolutely. So for me, it's just part of how we do our style of worship.
Yeah, of course. No, that's so good. Yeah, I totally agree. I feel like it's almost important that there's different ways of and environments in worshipping because everyone's different. And if we all did the same thing, it would be a lot hard for people to adapt to those things. I've noticed that some people love the like upbeat mosh pit music on a youth on Fridays, or there's people that just like a little chapel, just the old hymns and stuff. And I think it's all worshipping the same God. I think that's the biggest 100%. Reminder, is not the environment we're in or the way we're worshipping and the songs we're singing. We're all worshipping the same God. And if anything, that's something to be thankful for, that we don't have to all do the same routine, the same things, because it'd just be boring. Like, it would just be like everyone doing the same thing. I think there's actually something really special and something really beautiful that people have their own way of worshipping, and then just everyone doing the same thing.
100%. 100%.
One thing that I have noticed with worship is, I think nowadays in modern context, I feel like in cases we care more about the look of worship rather than a heart of worship.
Yes.
What do you think of what is a heart of worship?
I think heart of worship for me is that it's living our life as worship to God. So whether I'm waking up on Monday morning going to school or to work or whatever, university, that I choose on that day that I'm going to worship God through my time at school, my time at work. So for me, a heart of worship isn't a style. It's not a song. It's not a Sunday, even just on a Sunday. A heart of worship is I just love God every day of my life. And you don't always think about God all the time, but it's just a reflection. Sometimes you have those reflective moments where you go, I'm driving along and I'm just like, oh God, look you're amazing. And I love you and being thankful. I think that for me is what a heart of worship is. It's like King David had a heart after God. He wasn't, the most fancy king. He wasn't the best king, but he was so chosen because he had a heart of after God's heart.
Yeah.
So that really speaks to me because God is looking for our hearts, not our style.
Yeah.
Not our jumping around at youth, not our, our outward. He's looking for our heart.
So good.
And our heart is everything about us. So if I'm like at a party and I'm like, I'm going to drink tonight because I'll worship tomorrow or whatever, it's not what a heart of worship is about. A heart of worship is like, no, God, I want to love you every day of my life, every moment, every time. We're not perfect at it. We're human. But a heart of worship is always looking to God above anything else, I think.
Yeah, that's so good. Yeah, there's a verse, I think the Psalms is so good because David, especially on the Psalms, dives deep into the heart of worship. It actually says in Psalms 100, verse 1-3, it says, Shout for joy to the Lord, all the earth. Worship the Lord with gladness. Come before him with joyful songs. Know that the Lord is God. It is He who made us, and we are His. We are His people and the sheep of His pasture. And I think that's really important because obviously you're saying the song "Shout to the Lord" by Darwin Sheck. But I think that's what's most important about worship is shout to the Lord. It's not saying shout to the Lord on a Sunday or on a Friday. It's shout to the Lord. It means every single day wake up and worship Him. I feel like so often, I've seen it in my own life as a Christian. I'm like, I listen to worship music on the Sunday. But really worship is every single day. Like a God that has done that much for us deserves to be worshipped every single day, every single minute of our lives. And I think making that time to just have moments of just worshipping the Lord. I know one thing I've tried to do this year is just have moments instead of having like my usual music that I listen to when it's just relaxation time, like just getting worship music in. And I've noticed waking up to worship music and just worshipping the Lord and then going to bed with worship music is the best thing ever because you just wake up, you're reminded what an amazing creator you have every single day, and going to bed with that. I feel like that is thanksgiving. And I think as we read through David and in a moment, worship is an offering. Worship is giving and thanksgiving. What do you think, and how can we give worship as an offering, as giving to the Lord?
I think you kind of said it there as well. It's like finding moments throughout the day to just be thankful to God. Like you said, worship is just a thankful heart. That if I can go through my day and go, God, I'm thankful, Father, for what you're doing in my life right now. I'm thankful for what you've given me. I'm thankful for what you did on that cross, that I've been set free, that I've been forgiven, that God, you are my God over anything else. If we can be thankful all the time, I think that builds a heart of worship. If we're only thankful on a Sunday or on a Friday night at youth, we've missed the point of having a heart of worship. Because then it's like it's a God of youth, or it's a God of church. It's not a God of me.
Wow.
So like that's where I don't worship the lights, I don't worship the Sunday, I worship God. And Sunday is just a corporate time we all get together to fellowship, to build each other up, and then we go out of church and go, okay, now I'm going to take God into my week. So that's what church is for me. I think where Christians go get it wrong, and I've got it wrong in the past, is we make Sunday such a big event that is my Christian worship time. That is my time where I hear the only time of the week I actually hear any scripture. So when we actually do that, I think we miss the point of what church is. And it becomes a feed me church then. Like, I come to be fed at church, where I think it's the opposite. We come to church to give worship to God. And bring our worship and praise. And when we're at home, one-on-one with God is when we have those moments of hey, God, feed me.
Yeah.
Hey, God, speak to me. I think that's so important as a Christian to remember that, because we can get easily kind of distracted these days. You just got to look at Instagram and you got to look at worship music on YouTube, and it looks awesome, and the stages are awesome, the arenas are awesome, and you go, oh my gosh, that's where God is really moving, and you really feel that. And I don't think it's just, God does move in those big arenas and stuff, but why can't he move in our church or in my bedroom when I'm just one-on-one? God can move just as much there as he can in an arena.
For sure. Yeah.
With like an artist, a Christian artist, so yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I totally agree. I feel like that's the thing that confuses me sometimes is sometimes as Christians we wait for these big events and we're like, oh, God's going to move. But God's been moving every single day, not just a Sunday or a Friday. And that's something God has really spoken to me. And I think there's an intimacy with actually making the time to speak to God every day. Because when you go into church, you're all coming. That's the body of Jesus. You're coming as the body. But when you're actually making the time to almost like schedule just time in that quiet place with God, that's a greater worship than being up there on a Sunday night, putting your hands up and just singing to the Lord. It is so much more intimate, so much more powerful, and so much. It's almost more out of love to actually have the time, even with all the busyness of life, to just say, okay, God, I'm going to give you this space and speak to you. Another verse in the Bible, it is in 1 Chronicles 16, verse 29. It says, ascribe to the Lord the glory due his name. Bring an offering and come before him. Worship the Lord in his splendor of his holiness. And I think, like as we've been saying, it's really important that when we come with worship, it's an offering. We're offering our worship to God, and that's also really significant because in all the things in the world, constantly trying to call for us to worship it, whether that's drinking, whether that's drugs, whether that's even small things like video games or anything. Well, there's no really small or big thing. They're all massive. But when we actually say, no, I'm going to worship you, Lord, above that all, that's an offering. That's giving the offering of your worship. And that's so cool. Have you ever had a time where, I feel like we go through seasons as Christians where worship can be really hard, and what do you think about how to worship when it is hard to even just be there on a Sunday or even in your room just worshiping?
It's such a good question, because as humans, we are human. And I think God has a lot of grace for us in so many ways. We don't take that for granted. Like, we don't want to like have cheap grace. And just be like, well, God doesn't really care, like, or whatever, or he'll forgive me, and it's not about how much I worship or anything. And I've always felt like when I've been in a really dry season, it's worship that's just picked me back up out of that. And sometimes I can't sing to the lyric, but I might just put the song on in the background. I find a song that's always about, like, even though I might be in a valley, that God, you're on the top of the mountain, and you're reaching down with your hand down to help me back out. And so I find a song that helps me see God like that, or have moments where I'm not even singing. I feel that I can't let the words out. I just pray, God, I need you, and I just open my arms and just put a song on the car or in my room, and just let God really just minister through worship. And that comes back to how God made music. Because I feel like God made music to help us. Music, even people, psychologists will tell you this, music can lift your mood. Like if you have depression, sometimes happy music and good music is good for you. If you listen to bad music or like, heavy, like dark type music, it's actually not good for your soul. Christian or not. Psychologists will tell you that. And so music has been designed to help lift us up. And if you think about that in a biblical perspective, look at that Psalm 23 when we're down he says, I'll lead you to quiet pastures. I think the worship music and the way he's created music can help you and lead you to quiet pastures.
Yeah, for sure.
And lead you to a fresh stream.
Yeah, definitely.
And I see worship music as that. I know in my life, I'd be lost without worship. Obviously, God, 100%. But worship does help me through music line myself back towards Him.
Yeah, that's so good.
It's amazing. Like, you probably know it's like this as well, Jess. But sometimes you hear those worship songs and you just feel God like you've never felt Him before.
Yeah,
and that's for me being through music.
Yeah, for sure.
And like being outside or the outdoors, but music especially has always felt God so strongly in His presence when there's worship going.
Yeah, for sure.
And so I think when you can give God worship and just find His place, even if you're a dark season, and just let the worship flow over you, it really helps. It really does help.
Yeah, no, that's really good. I think music, as I've been saying, is so powerful, and it's a genuine gift from God. We know it's a gift from God. Like, we know that we can actually get gifts to use in music as well. And I think, as I've been saying, like, music is mentioned all throughout the Bible, through worship, and even just the gifts as well.
Yeah.
I think one thing that's really important in music, in general, is with the power of music, what do you think? How can we be discerned by power with music when it's things that aren't of God? And we see it nowadays, especially in society. I feel like satanic music is becoming very more open, and people are kind of normalizing it now. And it's quite scary that music like that is getting normalized. But also, I think there's a power in music which is really bad, and I've seen in my own life when music is just talking about drugs and sex. And all these things that are really sinful and hurtful, it can actually affect our minds, it can affect our perspectives. A person that always listens to music about sex is definitely more going to fall into lust, has more chance because it's in your head. We've spoken about it on the podcast before. The words you were listening to are getting declared over you. We have to be really careful sometimes what words are getting put into our mind. Because we're always talking about, as it says in Romans, you'll be transformed by the renewal of your mind. But when you're always putting things that are costing that renewal, it can be really scary. But what do you think about the issues of very open and now satanic music in the industry, which can possibly even affect our worship?
Yeah, it's true, man. I think what we listen to, music, like I said, God created music to help us and to move our emotions, and God created that way. Then people, sinful people, choose to take music in either direction. So God gives the gift.
Yeah.
So the music's not evil, but what is maybe lyrically written, or what is the intention of the music is what makes it evil. Yeah. So that's why you got to make that that kind of difference with that. In the 70s and 80s, the good Christian thing was you used to burn all your records, right? So if you had a bad AC/DC or Led Zeppelin, you had to burn it because it was so evil. Nowadays, like, you're right, there's more stuff out there that is just so openly against God in so many things. But I think because music was made by God to move us emotionally, it's the opposite as well with music. It's not good for us. Yeah. It moves us emotionally in those directions. And so if we listen to music that's always about killing someone, well, what else are you going to start thinking about more often? You know what I mean? Like, if you listen to music about God, you're going to start thinking about God more.
Of course.
Because the music is moving our emotion. I think you just got to be careful and use wisdom and discernment on what you're listening to. I still listen to non-Christian music, and some of the lyrics might be a bit, you might go, oh gosh, that's a bit hectic. Yeah. But I've got enough wisdom now to go, but that's not going to affect me. Yeah. But some other people, it might really affect. And so you just got to use wisdom and a bit of guidance. And if you feel, God's given us the Holy Spirit, right? Yeah. God's given us the Holy Spirit to be our helper. So when we're listening to music and we feel that feeling of, I don't think this is good, well, it's probably not good. Yeah. And so that's where we've got to use discernment in what we listen to. Because like you said, you listen to something and go, you just feel dirty. Or you just feel a bit like, oh, this isn't of God. Yeah. And that's how you kind of know, maybe I should not listen to that. Yeah. So I don't ever put a thing on, I don't ever listen to rock and roll. Because that was the old Christian thing. Yeah. Rock and roll or heavy metal, like, you burn it because it's so bad. I'm more of the thing now. Some of that, even there's Christian bands now that are heavy metal. Yeah, yeah. So the music's not the evil part. It's what the intention and the lyric behind the music and what that's all trying to represent and change you. So just wisdom, Holy Spirit guidance is what I would say. Yeah, yeah. I think with music, there's definitely times where it's like,
I felt it in my spirit, like, oh, I should be listening to this. I think it's a matter of self-control. Like, you know what you can withstand. If music, you can see as soon as you listen to a song that's putting all these thoughts, it's pretty obvious you shouldn't be listening to that stuff. But if you have the self-control to listen to music that you might like the sounds of stuff, and it's not going into your life and changing your decisions and your way of thoughts, go for it. Like, I don't see it's not a simple thing, but if it's leading you to sin, get rid of it. Don't get those ever get those thoughts in your mind, because I think everyone's different. I think some people can listen to any song and not be affected and just get their worship as strong as possible, but then some people, just even a song that even mentions a little bit of something that isn't godly can really take them off. I think that everyone's on different levels, but I think we should always be aware of our music, even if it's a music that doesn't have swearing in it, like what words are in it. A case recently was me and my mate were in the gym recently, and the gym always has weird music, but the lyrics of the song were your body is a temple, I'll worship you and stuff, and that shocked me. I was like, and it was like re-quoting a reinterpretation of biblical verses to fit sexual desires, and that shocked me. And this was playing in a public area, and I was like, I don't even want this to be declared over me right now, because I don't have the self-control for it, but who knows what that's telling another person. There's so many ways that the devil is moving now, and he's becoming it's so you can see it, and it's hard trying to get away from those things, but there's always going to be worship music. Till the day we die, there'll be still the songs that we were singing 1,000 years ago.
Absolutely.
But yeah, with music, how do you think we can use our gifts in music, whether that's drumming, playing guitar, piano, absolutely anything, to worship the Lord? And maybe that doesn't always just mean on the worship band on the Sunday. It can be anything.